Good afternoon viewers, and welcome to the EduSat lecture for the social science stream. Today we have with us Dr. Neerja Singh, who is an associate professor at Satyavati College, University of Delhi. Her specialization is modern India. She has written several books regarding to Sardar Vallabhbhai Patel. Books such as Nehru-Patel Correspondence, Gandhi and Patel Correspondence, Patel, Rajaji and Prasad, The Myth of Indian Right. We all are aware of the living proof that Sardar Vallabhbhai Patel's vision and his work that we have a unified India. And we have also going to read about the statespeople movement which led to the unification of India in the 1948s in the erstwhile British Raj. So learning more about this is the last lecture of this series, so we'll continue with this lecture and welcome Dr. Neerja Singh.
Thank you. Today's topic is Sardar Patel and the State People's Movement, and I have selected this topic because it is very crucial, keeping in mind that in 1940 Patel was able to achieve unification of these princely states with the ex-British India, and that is the independent India. Also, this topic is very important and significant for not only for the students of history, but for the people of India, that during 60s, 70s, 80s and 90s, the dominant intellectuals and the historians had this perception, who had, left leaning, had this perception that Sardar Patel was pro-princes, pro-capitalist and pro-feudal forces, and therefore he was in favor of the policies which could be based, he was in favor of the policies which was not anti these forces. But according in Patel's view and Patel's position, reading his works, reading his speeches and reading his stand on the policies, various policies, development oriented policies, policies related to the state administration, governance, Patel with great clarity said that I was telling the people this, I am quoting from Patel's speech, I was telling the people that the problem was as to how to snatch power from the ruler. From the times immemorial, those kings who did not know how to rule were deposed by the people. I told the same theory. Congress has decided that it wants to keep friendly relations with the rulers. But if there is misrule in the states, Congress cannot be a silent witness to it, because British Indian people and native states people are one and indivisible, unquote. Now, this statement denies the position or the perception perpetuated by certain dominant intellectuals and thinkers, because this statement proves the position of Patel and how he visualizes the feudal forces or the relationship or interaction with the independent India. He was very clear that the feudal forces have to go, they have to be familiar, they have to understand and see the writings on the wall. Also, they should be sensitive enough to perceive the responses of the subjects, how they are looking at the present situation, with what values and aspirations and expectations they want from the rulers, erstwhile rulers, and how they should behave in the changing times. And therefore, 2-3 things become very significant. First is that Patel was a mass leader and he was supporter of democracy. In the anti-colonial movement or anti-colonial agitation, he stood with the ideologies which was propounded and supported by Gandhi or the earlier leaders of the moderates or of the extremist era. and therefore Patel could not support any kind of political ideology or any kind of view which perpetuated, which supported feudal reactionary forces, one thing. Secondly, Britishers were playing the league and princely states and the princes against the Congress to curtail, to inhibit, to weaken anti-colonial movement, and therefore they always propagated, supported and publicized that the natural representatives of the state are the princes, and they, since time immemorial, they have been ruling it. They are the caretakers, well-wishers of these people of the princely states. Now this view Sardar Patel very strongly countered, along with the other leaders like Rajendra Prasad, Rajgopalachari, Maulana Azad, Nehru, Bose and others, of course Gandhiji. So much so that Rajendra Prasad also, in consonance with the views of Sardar Patel, said, and I am quoting Rajendra Prasad here, that let no one run away with the idea that the working committee or any member of the working committee is anxious to placate the princes. Therefore, what actuates us is not any overflowing love for the princes or anything in the nature of extra unjustified regard for their interest, but it is in the interest of the people of the states and the desire to make their conditions somewhat better than they are, which actuates the working committee in the policy which is to follow and which is now placed before you for your acceptance. I ask you to have that attitude in mind in regard to this question. It is undoubtedly true that if we can have a perfectly democratic constitution in the states, by states here Rajendra Prasad meant princely states, conditions will be infinitely superior to what they are at present. There can be no question about that. As the statement itself says, we have the same desire to achieve that objective as anybody else, either in this house or outside this house, but we have to recognize facts. We have to recognize our limitations. If recognizing these, we have to act cautiously, or as some might call moderately. All that I can plead is that you should give us credit for the best intentions in favor of the states. Now, this statement very clearly portrays that what was the position of the Congress leaders and the Congress party vis-a-vis the princely states and the state people's movement. Patel, along with his colleagues, supported democracy, self-governance, representative governance, representative institutions and institutions based on civic liberties. Secondly, they came from such background. Patel came from the peasant background, who had inherent distrust and dislike for feudal autocracy and wasteful luxurious lifestyle of the princes. Thirdly, Patel was very clear that Congress was not to placate the princes or their interest at the cost of the interest of the peasantry. And but situation is such, Congress has to realize the situation. Patel, being a mass leader, familiar, he had conducted large Bardoli is an evidence in support that what kind of mass leader and peasant leader he was. He was familiar with the ground reality, the position of the princely states and the position of the princes, and what was the position of the subject states of these in these princely states, how they were reacting to the anti-colonial notion of liberty, notion of freedom, notion of self-governance. And therefore, Patel very categorically, to those who were opposing Patel and to those who were arguing against the position of Sardar Patel, To them, Sardar Patel said that the situation is such that unless the protest comes from these state peoples, unless they show interest, unless there is evidence that they are ready for some kind of agitation against the princely states, unless that is not there, the signs are not there, it will be very difficult for Congress to interfere and mobilize and propagate or go there with some program of mass agitation, because by doing that it may turn out to be a premature attempt, and it may end into a failure, and if it ends into a failure, it will be very difficult for the people of the princely states to mobilize them, because first, there is no civic institutions, there is no place, and there is no evidence of civil liberty. Princely states or the rulers have not granted them freedom of person, speech, liberty, association or press, and civic institutions are also absent. Secondly, these people, and I mean these princely states have been ruling there for centuries, and there is a sense of loyalty and emotional attachment of these subject people towards their princely states. So, how far will they be able, I mean the Congress leaders will be able to mobilize and capture and capitalize on mere at the level of ideology, and at the level of ideology to initiate or to promote or to make them enthusiastic towards launching and or participating in a mass agitation against their princes. So, if the ground is not prepared, if the ground is not really, that is the social base is not there, then it will not be possible for the Congress to indulge there. Secondly, they themselves are also continuing anti-imperialist movement in the British India. Even there the situation is not very smooth, and the people have to be constantly mobilized, and they have to be constantly motivated, and therefore, if simultaneously they indulge in, I mean they initiate agitation, mass agitation in princely states, which number about roughly 500 to 600 princely states, without consolidating, without placing the anti-colonial agitation on a firm ground, on a firm footing, it will be committing suicide. So, the situation is that try to put pressure so that the princes introduce reforms. Try to put pressure so that the ideology of anti-colonial ideology, ideology towards protest, ideology for social justice, equality, and ideology for freedom should perpetuate, should slowly seep down, should slowly enter into the psyche of the people of the princely states. They try to internalize, react, and emotionally get attached and be ready for any kind of movement, then only a movement will be successful. So, need is to put pressure, but pressure should be such that it should not initiate a reaction by the princes, because Patel was very clear that we cannot antagonize the princes also, because if we antagonize the princes, Britishers are ready, they are already using league against the Congress, and they will get an handy princes, I mean as a tool to curb and curtail the movements of the movement of the Indian National Congress, and therefore they have to tread cautiously, because whatever the nature of the princes, there are good princes, there are bad princes, they have been ruling well, they have not been ruling well, but still they are Indians, and we cannot launch, we cannot carry out as agitation for Swaraj on divided houses. Therefore, he said that in his speech that need is to prepare the ground in the princely states. They do understand what kind of governance, what kind of administration is there in the princely states and how much the people are suffering, and the need for civic institutions, democratic institutions. But that has to be slowly and steadily and slowly one has to intervene. And so, at the moment the policy will be of non-interference but support from outside. And so, he said his advice to the people who were critical of Patel's this stand of non-interference but outside support was that, I am quoting from Patel's speech, "It should be understood, however, that the responsibility and the burden of carrying on that struggle within the state must necessarily fall on the state peoples themselves. The Congress can exercise moral and friendly influence upon the states, and this it is bound to do wherever possible. The Congress has no other power under existing circumstances. Although the people of India, whether under the British, the princes or any other power, are geographically and historically one and indivisible, in the heat of controversy, the limitation of the Congress is often forgotten. Indeed, any other policy will defeat the common purpose." So, here it is very clear that India has to, both British India and princely state have to be united. In both the parts of India, democratic institutions have to develop, civic liberties, concept of citizenship, concept of freedom of press, religion, association, ethnicity have to be developed, have to be evolved and have to be propagated and supported. In both the parts of India, new values of democracy, new values of humanism have to be founded, and on this solid foundation Swaraj has to be established. Without that, India will be, the new emerging independent India will be stunted, it will be lame, and it will not be the true Swaraj which people are expecting. Secondly, princes cannot be alienated, they have to be co-opted. So, direct interference should be avoided, direct interference, so that they fall into the trap of the imperialist propaganda, into the hands of the Britishers, that should be avoided. Therefore, very cautiously, very judiciously, political program has to be evolved, whereby subject people should be motivated, and these concept of freedom should be inculcated slowly and steadily, so that they do not experience any kind of repression from the princes, from the British forces, as the Congress did, that in its moderate phase and the extremist phase, they treaded this path of anti-colonialism very cautiously. Only they very vociferously they demanded for freedom, and they very strongly objected and talked about the democratic institution and self-rule, self-governance, when Indian national movement was strongly established on a very sound footing. And similarly, similar approach has to be followed in the princely state. The people's participation, motivation of people has to be slowly developed without alienating, without inviting any kind of repression from both the feudal forces and from the imperialist forces. And therefore, he said, Sardar Patel, that, quoting from Sardar Patel's speech, "Both Gandhiji and myself thought that we should not carry agitations in the states too far, because the princes too were not free, and even if they were willing, it was not in their power to fully concede to our demands, depending as they were on the sweet will of the residents, who in fact represented the will of the foreign power. Sardar Patel said the position of the princes was not independent. They themselves were not independent to take any kind of stand or any kind of policy independently. British residents were more powerful compared to the princes, and he gives example that in Rajkot, Thakur Sahab did not have the freedom as the British resident Mr. Cadwell was the he was the all influential, and he was controlling the administration and the governance. Therefore, Patel said, I was telling the people that the problem was as to how to snatch power from the rulers. From the times immemorial, those kings who did not know how to rule were deposed by the people. I told the same theory. Congress has decided that it wants to keep friendly relations with the rulers, but if there is misrule in the states, Congress cannot be a silent witness to it, because British Indian people and native states people are one and indivisible. I started my lecture with this quotation, and now this quotation becomes very significant, keeping the context in mind that three things are very significant. Neither the princes were independent, the British residents were the deciding factors, they were not, they could not take independent stand. So, they were enjoying their privileges without performing their duties, which as traditionally they were supposed to do, because British imperial forces were not, they did not want them, they wanted them as puppets whom they could use whenever they felt like against the Indian National Congress. Similarly, the people of the princely states were also emotionally attached to the princes because of traditions. They had the loyalty, emotional attachment, and how, to what extent could they march in this mass agitation for freedom, for establishing democratic institutions, like as the Indian National Congress was demanding. How far the people were ready to march along with the the leaders of the National Congress. And thirdly, the ground, the social base was still very shaky in the princely states, and Congress was not in the position to launch a full force with full blast of mass agitation in the princely states, because they could not ride two boats simultaneously. Conducting agitation in the British India, simultaneously conducting protest movement in the princely states. So, they had to be very cautious, very careful regarding what kind of policies they were to adopt towards the princely states. And in this 1934 Haripura resolution becomes very, very significant, where officially Congress, with the initiative taken by Sardar Patel, adopted that, quoting from Patel's speech on Haripura resolution, the Haripura resolution had given the correct lead to the states people. Haripura resolution said that they are going to support, if there is any agitation within the princely states, initiated by the local people and led by the local leaders. But the policy of the Congress will be of no direct interference, support from outside, and therefore Patel clarified the Congress position in the speech of his, that I am quoting from Patel's speech, the Haripura resolution had given the correct lead to the states people. By throwing them on their own strength, the Congress has spurred the state people to organize themselves, to develop political consciousness and cultivate the virtue of self-reliance. Haripura had opened the way for their onward march, and judging from recent happenings in several Indian states, it was clear that the Congress had acted wisely. All the more, he said, people of princely states could not escape the influence of what was happening in the adjoining British territory. He was glad that people of Baroda had become conscious of their rights. That was obviously largely due to the fact that they saw evidence of such consciousness in the British territory all around them. The villagers of Baroda must have watched with interest the brave fight put up by their brave brethren across the border in Borasat, Matar and Ahmedabad and the historic Dandi March. He further continued saying, we see before our eyes what is happening in various states. The Congress at Haripura asked the people of the Indian states to rely on their own strength, and we see today the fruits of such advice wherever it has been acted upon. If you march with hope and faith and courage and steadiness, your future is bright. The day will soon come when responsible government will be born out of your own strength. He concluded in his Haripura speech of 1938 that we are not desirous of dethroning the ruler. We wish to limit his authority. That state cannot survive whose Raja wastes an enormous amount of money on dances, etc., while the peasants die of starvation. If you are determined, no one can stop your progress, not even if all the rulers get together. Now, such statements coming from Patel become very significant, because one should keep in mind that here Patel was making such statements that if the ruler is not good, if he is not ruling in the interest of the people, if he is not ruling in the interest of the peasantry, if he is wasting, he is luxuriating, he is not performing his duty, morally he is corrupt, then it is the right of the people to dethrone him, to depose him. Same Patel could achieve unification of the princely states with the independent India, and with such love and respect the princess had for him. I mean, it becomes very, very significant that how this happened. Since Patel's fight and protest was based on ethics, on moral values, Patel was, whatever he was stating came from his heart, his genuine position, his genuine understanding of the suffering, and making the princely states, the rulers of the princely states, realize that what pathos, suffering the people were facing, and those who had served them with such loyalty and such honesty and with such gratitude and with such emotional attachment, that it is the duty, and if they are of the princely rulers, to appreciate, to realize the sacrifices the peasantry and the general people are making in for their luxurious lifestyle and for their comfortable living, and they are morally bound to perform these such duties, take care of the people. Therefore, this shift from Patel, who was agitating for democratic establishment of democratic institutions, for the agitation, for demand for self-governance, for demand for liberalism and freedom, could advance, could progress to the unification of these princely states with the independent India. Secondly, he made them realize also that the princes, if they do not read the writings on the wall, if they do not understand that what the new times are, what the aspirations of the people are, and how the other part, the ex-British India, the people, the privileges, after independence, the kind of institutions, the governance, nature of governance they are experiencing will finally influence the aspirations of the people of the princely states too. So, they cannot continue with the kind of regressive feudal system of governance, cannot go on forever. They have to change their style, and the style will be to unite with the new emerging nation India, with new vision and with new vision and with new culture, both political, social and economic. Therefore, Patel very significantly, the statements which he was making became very significant and very important. He clarifying the role of the further providing clarification, Patel in his speech at Rajkot said that it is inherent right of the people of the state to demand such responsible government as they desire and to secure its functioning by all constitutional means and to secure its functioning by falling on their bended knees before the ruler. But if such a cause does not materialize, they must, after proper training and strength, resort to direct action, and once determined, they must fight to the finish by all possible sacrifices. There is going to be one solution, and that is that the reins of the government shall be handed over to the people. It is not Cadell or Gibson's job to decide how to rule, that is the British residents' job to decide how to rule and how to frame rules and implement them. They have no right to do so. Loyalty to the state cannot be manufactured, and this is very, very significant statement which Patel made, and therefore such statement, those who are criticizing Patel of being pro-feudals, pro-princes, pro-zamindars should take this such statement and such position of Patel into account before they criticize his his position on the such social groups and social classes. That Patel said, loyalty to the state cannot be manufactured. The people can be satisfied only when their legitimate demand for responsible government is conceded. The demand being unanimous, neither the state nor the paramount power has any legal or moral justification for its denial, much less for the present policy to suppress such a demand. So, Patel was very clear that princes and the Rajas and Nawabs had no moral right to rule over the people, their people, as the way they are governing, as the way they are ruling. They have the every right, like the people of the British India, to enjoy democracy, liberalism and freedom and establish their own rule. They should participate in their own governance, and it should not be coming from above, coming from the princes. He warned to the princes and he told them that answer lies. He said that British India is keen to establish federation, but to acquiesce in a federation where princes enjoy immeasurable power would be to imperil the little freedom the subject of British India had secured, and at the same time it would doom the subjects of Indian states to eternal bondage. If the people of the states were to pull their full weight with the people of British India in federal affairs, not only should the representatives of the states to the federal legislature be sent through some process of election to the centre, but within the states also there must be constitutional machinery to ensure the administration of the states on lines approved by the people. So, princes they do not have the the authority, they should not rule in an autocratic manner. The people should participate. Any government should be participatory government. It should be responsive and representative government. And he very clearly made categorically and continuously in his position on the princely states and the kind of governance which should be there in the princely states. He very categorically made it clear that unless people participate, unless it is participatory, it will not be it will be dysfunctional governments. It will be a feudal autocratic government where people will be subjugated to misery and exploitation, and such governance and such government, if people throw it, then they are justified, they are then morally correct. And therefore, he said that I do not think that having taken from them everything else that mattered, we should not show any niggardly attitude in these matters. Few people have an idea of the numerous way in which they squandered away the revenue of the state. So, he was very clear that the princely states have been squandering they have been leading a kind of luxurious lives. Therefore, if people agitate, then such agitation should not be criticized, should not be rejected, but with empathy and sympathy it should be promoted and launched agitation. Such agitation should be launched, but cautiously, because as said that there were constraints, there were constraints on the Indian National Congress, there were problems, they were not in the position unless people themselves responded, the state peoples responded, and therefore he said that that British India should, as in British India there is democratic institutions, people are enjoying some freedom, if not, to some extent they are participating in local governance, and therefore if the people of the British India are enjoying in very small measure certain democratic rights and freedom, how could they, the leaders of such agitation, of such movement, see that the adjoining, their other brothers who are residing in the princely states are suffering, are deprived of such freedom. Therefore, it is their moral right that they should experience it, and therefore agitation should be there, mass participation should be there, Praja Mandals should be encouraged, they should be supported, but supported with caution, supported in such a manner that no repression happens, no premature repression happens, because once if such repression takes place, it will take further years to again mobilize the people, morally make them strong, inculcate, make them realize their self strength, their invoke in them feeling of self reliance and self respect, and then prepare them to launch agitation. This will take another 50 to 60 years, and therefore premature and decision taken on the basis of emotion will not prove successful. One will have to be very judicious, cautious, keeping in mind the ground reality, and then plan the political policy strategy towards state people's movement. And he said very categorically, he cleared that let no one run away with the idea, he said that people of princely states could not escape the influence of what was happening in the adjoining British territory. We see before our eyes what is happening in various states, and therefore we are not desirous of dethroning the rulers. We wish to limit their authority. He said there is going to be one solution, and that is the reins of the government shall be handed over to into the hands of the people. And so he, in his reviewing of what should be the in reviewing the position of the Congress, and why left leaders should not, the socialist leaders within the Congress and the left leaders with the left leaning should not be very agitated regarding the policy, the official policy or position the Congress has taken, because time is not ready. They have to take that into account. Just anger and agitation, they are troubled over the situation which is existing in the princely state, will not solve the problem. Problem will not be solved. Problem will be solved only when social base is ready, when the people themselves show interest that they are not ready for the agitation and ready in participating a movement designed on the lines of the anti-colonial movement which is taking place in the British India. And so he said that to the leaders of the Congress Socialist Party, to the leaders with left leanings within the Congress, he said, I am quoting from him, today we have consolidated the country, but if we had not succeeded in winning over the princes and induced them to play their part, the situation would have been difficult for them as well as the people. In India, there were many small states. They remained in the same condition in which they existed hundreds of years ago. The states of the type that were there before the foreigners came have of course ceased to exist, but the states of the type which the foreigners created and preserved for their own ends remained without any reforms or progress. With some of them, we had to enter into a struggle to secure human rights and our existence. And here he is referring to how he united Hyderabad or Junagadh, the problems he had to face in Hyderabad and in Junagadh. Putting their faith in the existence of these numerous states, many people thought that as soon as India became free, it would break into pieces. But it must be said to the credit of rulers that they realized their patriotic duty, and instead of balkanization of India, we had integration and unification. The process of integration is on. The princes have done their duty magnificently, but there are others who are hesitant, suspicious or turbulent. We shall survive to persuade them, but those who are out to do mischief have to be dealt with differently. They must learn a lesson from the fate that has overtaken those who did not fall into line in the march of democracy or in the process of integration. Even the biggest among this section had given in. The times have changed, and no human beings can wish to live on the sweat of others' labor. There is ample scope in the world for talent and ability. If you keep pace with the times, you can also remain in the vanguard. But if you go on as you have been going on for the last few centuries, and this he is warning to the princes, even the position at the rear will not be available to you. And very strong statement coming from Patel. Many felt that once paramountcy was over, they would become independent. Some of them had dreams of becoming His Majesty. This was entirely wrong and has proved to be so. Paramountcy can never be destroyed. It must always reside in the central authority because it belongs to the people. Whoever challenges it must perish. Whoever challenges the power of the people will perish. This coming from Patel was very strong movement. So he very clearly outlines what the position of the princes will be. They will have to, whether willingly or not so willingly, they have to join the independent India, the free India, the democratic India, the new India. They have to recognize the aspirations of the people of their states. They have to acknowledge their demands for freedom of press, speech, association. They have to value their demand to participate in their governance, participate in the self-rule, and build a new, dynamic, vibrant, democratic new state along with the British India. So, thank you.
May I ask a few questions regarding this? This was a very interesting talk, and you told us about the deliberations of how we actually got Swaraj, but we got a unified Swaraj. So, can you tell me something about what were the differences among the lives of people who were living in the princely states, as you were talking about the civil liberties and the rights that were granted to them, and to the people other than who are living in the British ruled India? So, were there differences between the two?
In the people who were, the British India, they were also exploited, but their exploitation was different from the exploitation faced by the people of the princely India. In the name of rule of law, the Britishers were exploiting the subjects of the British India. Here it was outright the feudal exploitation. So the nature, they were doing it, the princely states were doing it by sheer basis of their authority, which they were enjoying, or which they said that they had got from their centuries, from the what they had inherited,
loyalty of the people,
and what they had inherited.
Yes.
So they were the representative of the people. I mean, they were the rulers, were the representative of the wishes and the aspirations of the subject people. So whatever action decision they took, the princes took, was, I mean, they did not have to consult them, because they themselves were the embodiment of the manifestation of the aspirations of the people. So whatever they did would automatically benefit the subject people. This was not so, because Britishers, coming from the world's the most advanced industrially, politically,
yes,
economically nation, they had to keep the pretension that they were ruling in the British India in the interest of India, and by rule of law, by giving them self-governance, by not self-governance but encouraging local governance, and promoting values which were secular, which were rational, and which were based on democratic and rule of law. So by pretending that they were governing through these values system, they were in fact hiding, putting a facade of democracy,
yes,
a facade of modern rule, modern governance, which was not so. They, because the feudals, they could never think of, it was not in their psyche that they had to show or pretend. They thought that the rule, the laws, or the power they had, it was their birthright, so they could do anything. So there was no curtailment. And why would the Britishers would be interesting in encouraging them to introduce reforms?
Yes.
That they were happy as long as they kept quiet, and as long as they, any time if Britishers needed their help, they were there to help them. I mean, they wanted puppets, so they were there as puppets. So I mean, the two, one was the feudal phase, and what was the so-called modern phase, but not more. Through rule of law, I mean, Britishers taught how by this pretension of rule of law, they could exploit and steal the wealth of India.
Another regarding this aspect only, ma'am, when we are talking about Britishers were trying to put a facade of local governance, so does that local governance occurs only in the non-princely states? And how do we definitely know about the Camaraderie which is existing between the Raj and the princely states, so which was hoping that okay, we will be governed by kings and queens in the mainland, and all these princely states will be kings and his or her majesties in their princely state. So this camaraderie which was existing, so that does not form the part of local governments. The local government was occurring in the states which were not princely.
Yes, because over this years, as the demand of the Indian National Congress progressed, similarly they responded. Ripon introduced reforms. Then came the 1919 when the Gandhiji gave the call of non-cooperation Khilafat. 1919 Government of India Act, Directive was introduced. Then similarly, when the agitation took a much stronger shape during 1930s with the civil disobedience, Dandi March, they gave another carrot in the form of Government of India Act of 1935. But these reforms, the recommendations fell far short of the demands of the Congress which they were making. Therefore, they could never be the proof that they were they were reacting or they were acting in the interest of Indians, because the kind of reforms the Britishers were suggesting fell very short of what they were demanding. The Indian National Congress leaders and the Indian National Congress, or through the movement of anti-colonialism. Similarly, they never thought of introducing whatever they said that they have introduced in the British India. They could never think of introducing in the princely states because they never wanted India to develop. They were not ruling in interest of India. So they were ruling in interest of in England, and therefore their interest was a growing, booming British economy, English economy of the Britain and not of India. Therefore, they had to pretend, they for not losing face in the international world, in the international arena, they had to keep the pretension, and also in the political, ideological influences which were there, or the ideologies which was operating in England, which was in support of democratic rule by parliamentary rule. Therefore, they colonialists had to show that here, I mean, how could they prove that on the home front they were propounding, supporting democracy, and here they were indulging in vast kind of imperialism in the colonies. So how could they justify it? So the only justification they could provide was by pretending that here also they were introducing modern reforms, modern laws and modern governance and modern administration. So this pretension was there, and such pretension also required certain investment. So why their interest was to curtail, make howsoever little investment, I mean, or no investment. So why would they do further and increase their expenditure by introducing such measures in the princely states? They were not bothered, they were not concerned. Whatever rules, whatever kind of governance, if the feudal were enforcing on the on the people of the princely states, they were not bothered. They were free to do anything as long as whenever they required their support to curb or browbeat the Indian National Congress, they were to be there, and this is how they use the princely states and all the league or the other forces to weaken and suppress the international movement.
Yes. Ma'am, another thought that comes to my mind is regarding how the process happened. Can you show some light? Because what it appears that it is all by dialogue and deliberations, and by telling the princely states about their rights, and this was like walking on broken glass, because you could make or break it, as you said, that if this agitation was enforced too soon, or it will lead to collapse of the state. So can you tell me about how did Sardar Vallabhbhai Patel got on to do this process, and how was this taken up?
No, Praja Mandals were very active. The Praja Mandals, the local organization who were participating, demanding for democratization of the rule of the governance, they were there, and they were very active. There were movements in Travancore, Jaipur, Cochin, Baroda, Rajkot, Kathiawar. So there were people's movement were going on. Debate was that whether the Congress should directly participate in the movement which was being organized by Praja Mandal, or support them from outside. Because till 1938, 37-38, the movements were not very widespread. They were there. I mean, they were there in the major princely states. They were happening, but how strong they were there was still, they were not on a very strong footing. I mean, movements were carrying on, but so was the movement, agitation in British India. Civil disobedience had taken place in 1932, then it was withdrawn by 34, most of the leaders were there in prison. By 34, mid 34, they were released. 34, new party, Congress Socialist Party, came into existence. So many divisive, many different ideas, different forces were acting within the Congress. So Congress also had to set its house into proper position, and but they were not. They were not ready to open all fronts at the same time. So obviously they wanted that such movement happen. Praja Mandal should become more strong, and it is because of the movements of the Praja Mandals and the support Congress gave to them that they also helped in the unification 1949 which happened. Patel gave immense, not only Patel, Nehru, Patel, Bose, they all supported Praja movement activities of the Praja Mandals, and they played very significant role in the unification, be it in Hyderabad or Junagadh or Jamnagar or Jodhpur or Jaipur. So these Praja Mandals are very significant. But on the question of how, to what extent, to how much Congress should jump into this fray or support from outside, keeping in mind the ground reality, keeping in mind their position, were they there, I mean, to what extent were they in the position to take that responsibility also. So that was the issue of debate between the various groups within the Congress.
Ma'am, as you were stating that the statement of Patel which says that if the ruler is extravagant, is luxurious and is showing wastage and has no moral, is morally corrupt, doesn't show moral responsibility towards the subjects have the right, it's the people's right to depose them. Is this statement true forever for any country, be it a democratic or an imperialist country?
I think so. If the governance is not in the interest of the people, then that through whatever means, peaceful, I mean, we did that. Gandhiji showed us the path. Through non-violent means we were able to depose the Britishers and establish our own governance. So it is possible. And how will people protest? People will tolerate till they are beyond, I mean, there is a certain saturation point. Beyond that, people will revolt. And how will they express their opposition? How will they express their anger and anguish? Through protest only, whatever manner the protest may whatever direction may take its course. But largely it is the non-violence measure, because world over, whatever the method of protest, history has proved that the violent method has always not been so successful.
Yes, definitely.
It has been always ended in a defeat. And
thank you so much, ma'am. Thank you so much for the lecture and regarding the whole process of unification of India. Dear students, you can definitely catch up this lecture on the YouTube channel of CEC UGC, and do send in your comments and queries. So I would like to thank Dr. Neerja Singh, and we will be catching up again with her following this next lecture. So thank you, students.
Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am.